The A6700 has been out for a while now, and in this video, I'm sharing my thoughts on how I think this camera performs for bird and wildlife photography and filmmaking. And how good is the 4K 120 FPS? And is the image quality something you can count on? Grab some snacks or a fruit and let's go. So I want to start off by saying, this is not a super technical review. There are amazing creators out there doing the technical stuff. This is more of how I think the A6700 performs for wildlife photography and my opinion about the camera, basically. So I guess let's start with one of the most important things about a camera, in my opinion, the ergonomics. So I really love the grip of this camera. It's much beefier than I expected, and it really feels thought out when holding it. So I feel the fingers they naturally rest where they're supposed to on the shutter button. So many times I see myself just sit and wait for the animal to make its move so I can start bursting away. Then it's very nice to have the fingers rest naturally on the shutter button. And this might sound like a very small thing, but to be honest, I feel it's pretty important. I think they've done a great job with the grip. We finally have a wheel just below the shutter button, and this is something I personally cannot live without because I'm using that all of the time. So the previous model, the A6600, as well as the A7C, doesn't have this wheel. And I've never really been a fan of changing the shutter speed with the wheel on the back. It's just so much more convenient to have it on with a single finger here. It becomes the best when you combine this wheel with this wheel right here. So personally, I have it set up so I change the aperture with the thumb right here and the shutter speed with the finger right here. And it's been working out for a lot of years, and I'm really glad to see it on the A6700 here. And something I really enjoy with this camera is the mode style that you can quickly just change between photo, video, and S&Q with a separate wheel. My A7 IV has the same kind of design, and I am a big fan of it, and I hope it's here to stay for the upcoming cameras. So similar to the A7C and the A7 IV for that matter, is that the AF on button is now larger and has better travel time, if you call it that, when you press it. So why I keep comparing this to the A7C a lot is because I have the A7C and been using it for a couple of years. Surprisingly, they are almost the exact same size and almost the exact same price. So I think it's a fair comparison to do between full frame and APS-C. But even though they are almost the exact same size, I prefer the ergonomics of the A6700 a whole lot more, thanks to the beefier grip and the shutter on the back and all the accessible buttons and so on. It feels more modern and it feels way more thought out than the A7C. I've never been a fan of using that camera for photos, just because of those reasons, basically. So this camera has a fully articulated screen, which is very welcome. And I use it a whole lot, and it's great to be able to do this when carrying it in the backpack. So a very nice upgrade. So on the camera body, we have 3 different customizable buttons that can be programmed for whatever works best for your workflow. What I'm not a fan of, however, is the placement of the C1 button. It's on the side here. Depending on how you hold the camera, sometimes it's pretty hard to reach it, and you have to adjust your grip to reach the button. And I would prefer to have it maybe like beside the AF on button, or somewhere where I can reach with my thumb or my other fingers. But I guess it's a thing you can get used to. But yeah. So the EVF of this camera looks pretty good. It has a resolution of, I think it's 2.36 million dots, and it supports up to 120 FPS refresh rate. But if you enable this feature, it will drain a lot of battery. But I think it's very nice to be able to do it. So as you can see, it's not centered like it is on the full frame A7 IV and A7 III and so on. So design-wise, I totally see why they have it this way on the APS-C models. So it saves a lot of space and makes a big difference in the overall size of the camera. And I know this is something we've seen on basically all the Sony APS-C models, so it's not something specific for this model. So I still think it's a very functional viewfinder, but as a frequent viewfinder user photographer, in a perfect world I would wish it to be a little bit bigger. I also am a bigger fan of having the viewfinder centered like it is on the full frame cameras. But I also know that that would affect the size of the camera, and which in the end is one of the very big upsides with a camera like this. So one drawback of a smaller sized camera like this is the lack of a joystick on the back. So I think it's much easier to choose the focus point with a joystick, especially with gloves on, rather than having to like press the center button, then use the arrows on the back to kind of choose focus point. But one little neat feature is that you can use the screen as a touchpad. So when you have your eye up to the viewfinder, you can, in the settings set, so you can use your thumb on the screen to choose focus points, and it's pretty cool. So I think that's a very nice feature, but I would prefer a joystick. So this camera has 1 slot for a SD card. Of course, it would be nice to have 2. And when you're out in the field, it's always nice to know that the rare encounter you just had is backed up safely on 2 SD cards in the camera. But I guess this isn't a deal breaker until you've had an SD card fail on you, which haven't happened to me yet. So what about the image quality when taking photos with this camera? On low ISO photos, I feel that you can push the photos pretty hard in post without the image falling apart on you. And I think the overall sharpness and details this sensor captures is very, very good. So on photos with like a higher ISO, let's say 1000 to 2000, the noise is starting to get pretty noticeable. And especially in darker areas like the shadows or in the background and so on. But luckily, in most situations, the details are still excellent, even though there's noise in the photo. So applying some noise reduction in post will easily remove the noise without making it look very unnatural and AI-like, because that's usually a thing when you're trying to fix both noise and sharpness in post. So I feel like when a camera captures great details but is noisy, it's very easy to fix because noise is not really a problem anymore. But fixing details, however, that's when we start to have issues. So above 2000 ISO, the noise is gradually increasing, obviously. But I feel like it's not until ISO 12800 where the image is starting to kind of fall apart and we start to lose contrast and details. And that is honestly very impressive to me for an APS-C camera. So during the period I've been borrowing this camera for the review, I've been taking probably one of my favorite series of photos ever with this camera. And I haven't felt any regret that I didn't bring my full frame camera that day when I had that amazing encounter, because I feel that for that situation, this camera holds up perfectly. So I guess that's my conclusion about the image quality, that I definitely think you can count on this camera when it comes to semi-dark situations. And without sounding too much like a cliche, it's not about the specifications on your camera, it's about how you use the camera when you take photos. So what about the 26 megapixel sensor that this camera has? Is the resolution enough for bird and wildlife photography? So I think so, and especially when the frame is already cropped by 1.5 times to what I'm used to with the full frame camera. Sure, in some situations there would be nice to be able to crop in even harder, but if the equivalent focal length of 900 millimeters isn't enough, heat waves or mist will probably ruin your photo before the resolution does. So is 26 megapixels a problem? Definitely not. So one of the very good things about the A6700, in my opinion, is how good of a 4K image it can produce. So recording in 4K 25p and 4K 50p, we have the ability to shoot in 10-bit 422, oversampled from 6K, and it doesn't crop in anything, and this looks absolutely stunning. I can easily see myself using this for in great light filming basically everything. I'm very pleased with how this performs. But there is just only that thing, you need lots of light. So when shooting in 4K 100p, however, there is a 1.58 times crop additional to the APS-C crop, like compared to a full frame sensor. And sometimes this is great for wildlife photography when your subject is very far away and you need to reach as far as possible but still record in 4K resolution. But the downside with the cropping is that the low light performance will suffer, as well as the details in the shot. But this doesn't mean that it's unusable or something like that, but it is pretty noisy when you're shooting on a cloudy day with the 200 to 600 on, for example. So this sensor has a dual base ISO of 800 and 2500 when shooting in S-Log3. So the recommendation is to shoot at either of those ISO values to get the most out of the dynamic range and the noise performance. I personally almost shoot everything in S-Log3 all the time, and a little feature that I love is that you can have a LUT overlay. So you can import your own LUTs to the camera to have them in preview when you're shooting, so you can see how the graded footage will look like after you've edited it. When you import the files onto the computer, they will still be in S-Log, so it's just an overlay. And I've been using that on my ZV-E1 a lot, and I really like it, and I'm glad to see it on the A6700 as well. So on the screen here, you can see examples of high ISO footage, and I'm pretty surprised on how well it can handle ISO 32,000. Like, that is a lot, and especially for an APS-C sensor. But the noise is most noticeable when shooting in 4K 100p, because you need a faster shutter speed and the frame is cropped and so on. So make sure that you have lots of light if you're planning to shoot slow motion video with this camera. It's better to go with 50p for better looking footage in low light. And I think it's very cool to see a hybrid camera in this price range being able to shoot 4K 120p 10-bit footage. That is actually very impressive. So I've read a lot about overheating issues with this camera. This camera doesn't have internal fans as it does on the FX30, which has the same sensor. So this could be a problem for you if you're shooting longer video clips in 4K 50p or 4K 100p. Personally, I never shoot long video clips in those frame rates, because it's usually a owl flying by and I just want a quick video of it. So my 4K 100p is usually between 3 to 30 seconds and not more. But if you're primarily shooting video and often tend to shoot longer video clips, maybe this camera is not for you. I would recommend the FX30 instead, because it has internal fans. You get the same image quality, but you can record for longer periods of time thanks to the fans. So I can see why this is a problem for many people, but it's very cold here, so for me at least it's not a problem. Let's talk about the autofocus of the A6700, shall we? So tracking flying birds with this camera works like a charm, and I feel the hit rate is very high. I've been very pleased with like the autofocus on the A7 IV, but I actually feel like this is slightly better. So I've been lucky enough to be able to try this camera on very challenging subjects through this month that I have had this camera for both videos and for photos. Together with the 11 FPS shooting that this camera offers, I'm very pleased on how it performs. So the tracking works really well on flying birds. I've had some issues with the AI thing, the AI tracking, or what they call it, when the subject was pretty far away and the background was very busy. I know this is a very tricky situation for most cameras. Then I had some issues, and you have to kind of help the camera out by placing a focus point near the bird and so on. And I'm very used to this because this is how I've been doing it for the last 5-7 years. But otherwise, I'm very happy and pleased with the autofocus. It's very fast and I find it very accurate. And if you have a still sitting bird and you use the bird eye autofocus, it works flawlessly, just as it do on my previous cameras I've tried. So I think Sony here is leading. So I've never tried like the Canon and Nikon versions of, but I've read online that Sony is top of the game when it comes to eye autofocus on birds. So it would be nice to try it out. So I think I'm gonna reach out to someone and maybe do a video where we're trying out all the different functions. That would be fun. But again, I'm very happy with it. So a small little detail that this camera offers software-wise, just as the ZVE1 does, is the ability to have animal as well as bird eye autofocus in the same settings. You don't have to switch between those two when you're out looking for wildlife. You can just have it on both and it will detect whether it's animal or bird. And I really, really like this. It's a small thing, but I really miss it on my A7 IV. So my overall thoughts about the autofocus is it's very capable, and I would definitely trust this camera taking it out for an important like photography mission. So before I share my conclusion of whether this is something to get or not, I asked a friend who's been using Sony APS-C cameras for many years what he thinks. So what are your thoughts?
Honest thoughts?
Yeah.
So I really like it. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I've been using Sony APS-C for the last 10 years almost, and this was such a big upgrade. Not only as the grip. You tried the grip, right?
Yeah, I love it.
So nice. This little thing here too, really nice. Such a great addition, and also just the fact that you can shoot 120 frames per second, 4K, and the photo capabilities, and how quick you are to switch between photo, video, and SNQ. Love it. This is perfect, in my opinion. Maybe not, nothing is perfect, but for what it is and for at the price point,
yeah,
so good. So happy.
I totally agree.
I mean, if you're thinking about it, I bought it myself for my own money, so obviously I like it a lot and I use it a ton, so I would recommend it.
Thanks for your thoughts.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for take back your camera. I like it. I'm just gonna keep standing here.
Great. Bye. So to sum things up, is this camera any good for wildlife photography? But first, I think we need to answer the question, what makes a camera good for wildlife photography? So stuff I'd personally like on that list: great ergonomics, fast autofocus, great low light performance, fast burst speeds, 4K 120p, large EVF, silent shooting, good enough battery life, 2 SD card slots, and I think that's about it. And in my opinion, I think the A6700 checks almost all of these boxes, which is very impressive to see, on a camera in this price range. So while the low light performance is very good for being an APS-C sensor, a modern full frame sensor will give you less noisy footage in low light situations, but it will also give you less reach. So I think it's all about finding a balance between your needs as a photographer, like if you're debating between going APS-C or full frame. So this is not a APS-C versus full frame video. I always come back to comparing it because I've been shooting full frame for a lot of years now. So it's hard to not like compare it. And something I really like with the APS-C world is that the choice of lenses is very wide, but also the lenses are like very affordable compared to full frame lenses. And I also really love that you can reach so far with a camera like this. The setup doesn't need to be super big. Like if you pair this with it's like Sony 70 to 350 millimeters, you can basically fit that in your jacket pocket, and it will give you the equivalent focal length of like 525 millimeters, which is pretty insane if you think about it. Like you can reach so far with a camera setup that fits in your pocket and is more affordable than full frame. But again, there are some drawbacks and some positives with a camera like this compared to full frame. So I can't say what's right for you, but I can say this. If you're getting this camera, you're getting a very capable hybrid camera that does photo and video very well. And to be honest, cameras nowadays are so ridiculously good that we're spoiled with image quality. Whether it's Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, we are so spoiled. So I guess this is just a little reminder that if you have a camera, go out and use that camera. Put effort into studying the behaviors of the animals, but because that will give you the best looking photos and footage rather than having a very expensive, good camera. I remember when I started out, I had a Canon 550D and a Tamron 70-300, and I enjoyed being out so much. And during that time, some of the encounters that I had is still on top of my list of the best ones I've had. So it's more important to get to know your subjects. And in the end, that's what we all will remember when we're getting old. The encounters, not the noise performance of a camera. But if you want a very compact camera setup that will do like everything very well, I can highly recommend this camera. Well, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.